So let's get started. I know we'll have probably a couple people still trickle in. If everybody could mute themselves, and then we'll have a time for Q&A at the end. So Miguel, welcome. It's a pleasure to have you here. I want to introduce everyone. Today we're going to be focusing on introduction to design systems. So I have requested to have Miguel join us, and he will make a little bit of an introduction for himself. But Miguel is Director of Product Design at NYC, and he leads design and marketing at Rita Creative. You can unpack these for us, Miguel. And then you also lead instruction at General Assembly and Career Foundry. So I know a lot of you are probably going to have opportunities apart from this in the QA, maybe to ask some information about boot camps and things like that. So feel free to do that. If you also want to connect with him, he's on miguelmakes.com and he's in LinkedIn. So actually, I'm going to hand it over to you, Miguel, and you can take it away.
Great. As I transition, thank you so much, Jonathan. I have been connecting with some of your people on LinkedIn, or some of your folks have been connecting with me on LinkedIn, and everyone has positive things to say about what you're doing here. So really great stuff. Hey, everyone. It's great to meet all of you. From what I hear from some folks, y'all are in really great hands with the support of Jonathan. I watched some of your videos and from some of the previous sessions, and I gather that you're a lot like me, that you care a lot about giving back, especially when you hit a certain point in your career where you feel like you have something to give back with. So very, very similar to Jonathan there. So hey everyone, like I said, like has been said, my name is Miguel. I am going to be talking to you all about design systems today. So my presentation style is a little different from other folks that Jonathan might have here, and I say that as humbly as I can. My slides are very minimal. They're more about what comes out of my mouth, less about what you're seeing with your eyes. And I like to keep things very direct. So if some things sound a little brash, that is by design. That is just my style. I don't mean to offend anyone. So
no apologies necessary.
Let's do it. So I just want to start off by saying, everybody knows that design systems are cool, but I think that's part of the problem. I think that there's a lot of hype around design systems, and so that makes everyone feel like, they want to build it, or like they should be building them. And oftentimes it gets people so excited that they think they are building them when they're really not. So this is completely an introduction to design systems, and really breaking down what the hell they actually are. They are not just this cool thing that has people excited. They are this really intentional, methodical thing that really aids product design and development teams. So I think one of the big reasons why there is such mystery around design systems is because a design system is not just one thing. And oftentimes when we're exploring a concept, or when we're looking to understand something, we want to understand it very simply. What is the one thing that it is? Just cut to the chase. Just tell me what it is. You can't do that with design systems, and you should not do that with design systems, because design systems are not just one thing. Design systems are made up of a few things, and those few things come together to aid product design and development teams. So inherently, design systems are more about people than they are about design, than they are about product, than they are about all of those flat, fancy, fluffy things that you may think they are about. So I'm going to hit you with a pretty complex definition right off the gate, unapologetically so. And then throughout this entire talk, we're going to make references to that definition. And hopefully by the end of it, you have a better understanding of what design systems are. Before I give you this definition, I just want to call myself out. I am not going to be talking about how to create one. I'm not going to be talking about, the things that I know everybody wants me to talk about. I think it is a mistake to start with design system education with design, because everything that is outside of the scope of the design part of design systems is everything that design systems are about. So let's talk about that. A design system is a living product that offers a collection of visual styles, components, patterns, and UX guidelines that are all informed by a set of design principles with the purpose of serving an ecosystem and improving the product design and development process. There's a lot here, but all of these things are actually not as complex as they may seem. I am not super familiar with the level of UX practitioner that is in this group, but basing it off of the term mentorship, I'm assuming that most folks are earlier on in their UX journeys or somewhere in the middle where they're perhaps looking to find a new role. So with that understanding in place, I feel that most of this should make sense, but I want to call out a few things here. So first of all, it being a living product. What does that mean? What does it mean for it to be a living product? I thought the only product that was alive was the one that we were focusing on shipping and working for the company, right? So how is this another thing? And then the list here: visual styles, components, patterns, UX guidelines. Perhaps some of y'all have seen the term design principles, which that would make me very happy. And then what is this whole business about serving an ecosystem? And I'm hoping the last few words make a little sense, a lot of sense there. So with all of that said, let me introduce myself. That is setting the tone for what we'll be talking about. My name is Miguel, and I consider myself an experienced design strategist. Of course, I consider myself a UX practitioner, but specifically, I've focused my entire career on strategy. That was a choice. While I was learning to become a UX practitioner, I was starting a business. And so I've always been very empathetic to business. I've always loved the business side of things. I love keeping up with stocks. I love keeping up with all of that jazz. And so this is just something that has been really a big part of, you know, my professional journey. And so when I was exploring UX, I decided to combine my design chops with my business chops. And that is exactly what UX strategy is: the intersection between business and UX design. I am from Brooklyn, New York. You might have seen me on the internet as Miguel Makes, just to keep it really simple, some little personal branding jazz there. And I work for New York City. I am proudly representing what I consider to be the best city in the world. And I work for New York City's marketing slash tourism organization, agency, whatever you want to call it. And yes, it is a pretty interesting time to be working for NYC and Company, but nonetheless purposeful. And that's what gets me really excited. And we're also hiring for a mid to senior level UX design freelance position. So stick around after the chat, after the talk, and maybe we can chat. I also teach, as Jonathan said, mentioned, I am a instructor at General Assembly. I've taught a few courses there, the part-time course specifically, of course, because I have my day job. And I get a lot of joy out of, you know, mentoring the next wave of UX designers. And, you know, that is why I have a lot of respect for people like Jonathan, who are, you know, not about this silly gatekeeping business, but we're actually doing something about it. We're actually trying to, you know, help the next wave. And I think that's really exciting. And I also make YouTube videos. So if you don't follow me on YouTube, make sure to do so. Subscribe to my channel. I never thought I would be saying things like subscribe to my channel, but here I am. I make YouTube videos. I drop a new video once a week. I try to make them very conversational, not a lot of edits, not a lot of fancy things, just straight to the point, raw, just talking straight to the camera, talking straight to you. So follow me there. And also feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. And my latest channel that I've been trying to grow is Instagram. Like Jonathan, and I won't spend too much time talking about this next thing because out of respect for the space, but I do have a UX community of my own. It's called the UX Come Up. So perhaps one day the UX Come Up and Jonathan's group can do some sort of collab event. I think that'd be pretty cool. So let's go back to what we're here to talk about. Let's go back to this definition. Now that I've, you know, bragged about myself for the past however many minutes, let's come back to talk about design systems. So a design system is a living product that offers a collection of visual styles, components, patterns, UX guidelines that are all informed by a set of design principles with the purpose of serving an ecosystem and improving the design and development process in conjunction with products. So what in the world does this mean? Well, first of all, let's take a step back. Like I said earlier, I assume most people here have a basic understanding of what UX design is, so I won't be overly defining it, but just to kind of set a baseline situation here. Simply put, in UX, we do a lot of research, and that research informs a lot of product design decisions. And those product design decisions have to be considerate of our user needs, a la the research, and then also the business requirements, which again is something that I like to call out because I am a UX strategist. With that being said, where does design systems fit into this whole mess? So when it comes to design systems, this isn't a replacement for UX. This isn't a different way to UX. This is just a different approach to how we UX. So when it comes to design systems from research or design, obviously we're more on the design side of things, but there is a bit of research in design systems work. And actually some companies have entire design systems teams that do research, do the design work. So this can get really big really quickly. This can become a really sophisticated effort. But anyway, the point that I'm trying to make here is that this isn't changing anything about the process. This is an approach. This is a different way to approach product design. And so that is what I'm going to be selling you on through this talk. All right, so before I do so, I just want to give you a brief overview of my journey with design systems. Why am I here talking to you? What leg do I have to stand on, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So like I started to say earlier, to those that were early on the call, I've tailored my entire career to design systems. That's actually been the sole focus of my UX career. From my very first company, I started building design systems, but the background of that was my background in technology. So before I was a UX designer, I was a front-end developer. And after I was a front-end developer, I was a UI designer. So both of those things, I think, for me, changed the game for how I saw design systems. And it was just really natural for me to look towards design systems as something that I was really comfortable with. So now with both of these things in my history, with my developer background and my UI experience, that allowed me to get my first gig at this company named Cox Automotive. And at Cox, I built my first design system, or I helped to build a design system with a team of other talented UX designers. And that design system was called Tracksuit. And this is the website where the design system was housed. My second experience was with my own company that I was already building. But at this point, this is where I made the second design system for my company named Reader Creative. And that actually has powered the custom website platform that we built for our clients. So it's based on our design system, which I just think is so freaking cool. And then the third design system that I built professionally was for this company named OnSolve, who had a lot of different subsidiaries, and they wanted to bring them all together under one look and feel. And so I built the OnSolve designs. I helped them build the OnSolve design system. And then most recently, for NYC and Company, I helped build the design system that was meant to really take our product design and development to the next level. And I'm going to say this unapologetically so, I am trying to create the first design system for a city organization. I don't know if somebody already beat me to it. I hope not, but that is my goal when I wake up. And I thank the good Lord for making me a UX designer. So that is the overview of my design system experience. And so that's why I can confidently talk to you about design systems. So let's just super simplify design systems. Let's forget about that big definition that probably made y'all a little dizzy at the beginning. Let's just simplify this to three things. Let's go Steve Jobs with this. So three things: the design, the code, and the thinking. So when it comes to design system, these are, when I was saying at the beginning, it's not just one thing, it's multiple things. At its most simple, at the simplest core, these are the three things that make up a design system: the design, the code, and the thinking. Let me answer this question now before somebody writes it in the chat or wherever. And by the way, if you are asking questions in the chat, I'm not looking at the chat, so I'm not seeing. But anyway, when it comes to the code, I'm not asking you to code, or I'm not telling that you have to do the code part. I am saying when you're working on a team, on with a company, and you're building a design system, it's not just the fancy design that you're building in your sketch file. The design has to be matching the code one-to-one, or the code has to match the design one-to-one. The components that you're building in your sketch file need to be matched one-to-one to whatever the developers are doing in the code. There can't be any discrepancy, otherwise you don't have a design system. And lastly, the thinking. So let's break each of these three things down. So when it comes to the code, your entire design system from a design perspective, and I'm going to keep checking us like that, from a design perspective lives on some design file, whether that's Figma, whether that's Sketch, whether that's Adobe XD. It doesn't matter what your design tool of choice is. The design of the design system, the components, the design of the components in the design system, they live somewhere from a design perspective. And that means that they live in some design file. And so this design file becomes like the design library of your design system. So this is a screenshot that I took of our design system. These are our buttons and these are a couple of our cards. Of course, you see the responsive nature of them there. So this is a sketch file. This is just an artboard that I took a picture of just to put it up for this talk. So now the second thing, the code, what does that mean? So you can see, I'm gonna go back here, freestyling a bit, but this card that you see here, this is the exact same card with the same exact specs that you see on the website of our homepage. That is a one-to-one match, pixel perfect from a width, height, drop shadow, the curve on the top right, they have a one-to-one match. So you can see here, card tile, that is exactly what I'm calling this guy, large card tile from my sketch perspective. And it's the same exact thing. There is no disconnect. So when you just have your fancy little sketch file with all your fancy symbols alone, that's not a design system. You have to have that combination from the code, from the product to the design system. And then lastly, the thinking. What the hell does the thinking mean? Well, the thinking are the guidelines, the rules, the standards. How do I use that card? When do I use that card? How often do I use that card? Why should I use that card? All of those rules, all of those thoughts, all of those guidelines, those live somewhere. And you're now looking at the design system for NYC that I built, and it's built on Notion. It's just not publicly available yet. But those thoughts, those design references, those code snippets, all of those things, they live on this documentation hub. And that is where all of the thinking lives. So that is what I mean by the thinking. So put these three things together, you are now an expert at design systems. You are like way ahead of the game, especially if you initially thought it was just like these style tiles. I make fun of people when they just start talking about this as style tiles. So you're now ahead of the game. So this is now a design system. So like I said, a design system is not just one thing. Let's take a break. Let's take a breather, specifically because I want to take a water break. Let's read this definition again. So I'm going to ask you to read it a couple of times during this talk, and I hope that it starts to make more and more and more sense as we reach the end. So now let me ask you a question. What's the difference, or you are asking me a question. All right, Miguel, this is cool. But what is the difference between all of these things? We have brand guidelines, we have a style guide, we have UI library, we have component library. I'm sure you've heard of a front end library. There's a pattern library. There's a front end style guide. There's a design system. What is the difference between all of these things? Although this is an introduction and I do care deeply about giving you more content than cheaping you out of other content, I am not going to go into detail of the differences between these things to each other. Instead, I want to talk about the differences between these things and design systems. So what is the difference between a brand guidelines and design systems? What is the difference between the second and the sixth? What is the difference between the third and sixth? So the difference is that a design system is all of these things. All of these things are inside of a design system. The design system is the biggest thing that there is. A pattern library is not bigger than a design system. Brand guidelines are not bigger than a design system. Brand guidelines are inside of a design system. Now, it doesn't mean that all of these things must be inside of a design system, but I am just talking about the contextual order of how these things should be referred to as. And the order here is that design system is the bigger thing and all of these other things live inside of it. So when I talk about that documentation hub, the brand guidelines are on that hub. The sketch file, that's utilizing the brand guidelines from a color palette first perspective, from a typography perspective, yada, yada, yada. So here are some examples of some of my favorite design systems, but specifically talking about their documentation hubs. So Apple's Hig. And by the way, these screenshots are really old because these are screenshots from like the first time I've ever given a talk on design systems, and that was a long time ago. And so if you go to these websites now, they look totally different, just because apparently I'm so lazy and I don't want to update the original pictures that I took, or call it nostalgia, I don't know. But Apple's Hig is one of the best design systems that I've seen. However, I don't recommend it for beginners because it is rather sophisticated, and it has a lot of different platforms, and it gets kind of a little more advanced. So I don't recommend looking at this for beginners, but it is one of my favorites. For beginners, I recommend you looking at something like Lightning Design System by Salesforce. This is a really good intro to what a model design system should be like. And sorry about that, I clicked outside. And now, I really respect whatever side of the coin of this great American experience that you lie on, but I think we should all agree that one of the coolest things that this country does is we have our own freaking design system. Like, what other country have you heard has a design system? So at least when it comes to this, I am the most patriotic. I think this is the coolest thing that us as designers could.
It's New
Sign of
York
the
City.
times. Yeah, sign of the times. Speaking of, so I think it's so cool that we have a design system, and this is a really good example of a purposeful design system. We have a design system because the government has a lot of websites, and they need to maintain some standards with those websites from an accessibility perspective, right? So this is a really cool design system, I think, for beginners to look at. Material design. This screenshot is so painful because it's so old. Carbon by IBM. It's like another great one for beginners. And then lastly, my forever favorite, even though I know I said that about Apple's, but this one from a for everyone perspective is Atlassian's design system. The website looks super, super different now, so it'll look like a different product, but same core. So, okay, I have all of these design systems. Now what? Where do you start? Where do you start with all of this? Well, I think anybody who's serious about design systems, they should not look at Sketch. They should not think about Figma. They should not go into Adobe XD, Photoshop. I don't know why you would use that, but for UX, but any of these things, you should not start there. You should get the hell out of your product design tools. And instead, you should go to Atomic Design, and you should read the book Atomic Design. Atomic Design is a concept created by this awesome individual named Brad Frost, who's been a personal inspiration of mine, but he doesn't know it. One day I hope to thank him for the inspiration. He inspired me a lot because he was a web developer, front-end developer, one of the two, and I used to be that. And then he kind of started flexing his expertise that impacted design perspective. So I really respect this individual, and he has a really great book that I think is available online for free. So if you intend on reaching out to me and asking me questions in the future about design systems, and I ask you, did you read Atomic Design? And the answer was no, I'm not going to help you. And I'm going to sleep perfect at night. But I will give you a brief overview on Atomic Design right now so that I can inspire you or motivate you to check it out, because I do think it's rather fascinating. So Atomic Design is built on this idea that things should come together and build on top of each other, and using atoms and atomic makeup as the metaphor. So you start with atoms. Atoms are the basic building blocks of matter, right? So a basic building block in the concept of product could be a button, it could be a label, it could be an input field, right? Things that we should all be familiar with. A molecule is when you start to combine atoms together. So molecules, in other words, are groups of atoms that are bounded together and are the smallest fundamental units of a compound, right? And taking this metaphor really seriously. So when you combine those atoms that I just referenced, a button, a label, an input, what is that? That's a form. So we can combine those things, and that creates our first molecule, a form. And now you can combine multiple molecules to create organisms. An organism could be, you have a form, let's say an email sign up form, and let's say you have two lists. What does that sound like? A footer. And so that footer can be an organism. Now, let's say you have a footer, you have a header, and you have another organism. You combine those together. What does that start to sound like? A template. And then a more involved template could become a page. So this is how all of this comes together. However, if you're a super web geek like myself and super respect the history of technology, one of the people that I respect most is Tim Berners-Lee, and he has this great piece on modularity. And modularity is essentially what this whole thing is about. This introduces this whole concept of this Lego piece idea. So a design system is just a tub of Lego pieces. You know, when you're a kid and you have this box of Lego pieces that looks like one big Lego piece, typically the color yellow, right? That's a design system, and all of the things inside of it are your Lego pieces. The same thing with a design system. The tub is the documentation hub, and then everything inside of it is the Lego pieces. It's helping you build whatever you want to build. But of course, you can't build everything with Legos if you don't have certain pieces. It's the same thing here. But the idea is that the pieces that we do have, we can plug and play. Modularity. So this isn't to say that every design system you built should be based on this atomic design idea. This is meant to say that this should inform the way that you look at the makeup of a design system. And so that's what I've done my entire career for every single design system that I've built or managed. And that is what I did for my most recent experience at NYC. So the makeup of our design system looks like this, and I'm giving you a sneak preview into the way that we do things. So we have foundations, we have components, and we have scenarios. As I'm talking, and I know I'm going rather quickly because I want to give you as much content in the little time we have as possible, I want you to think, okay, where's the metaphor here? Where is atomic design here? Where do you think atomic design fits into this? I'll give you a second while I take another sip of water. So this is how we executed on this metaphor. So what we call foundation, what Brad Frost calls atoms, we call foundations. What Brad calls molecules and organisms, we just wanted to simplify, we call components. And what he calls templates and pages, we call scenarios. Let's get more specific though. What we call foundations, other folks call colors, typography, icons, logos. Components are things like buttons, cards, navigations, etc. And scenarios are things like page templates, landing page templates, a home page, etc., etc., etc. Cool. Awesome. This all sounds great, but now what? So in order to start thinking about a design system, and I'm purposely not talking about sketch file, how you set it up, naming conventions, none of that. I personally am not ready to talk with y'all about that because I don't think it's time yet. But what we do want to think about is how do we start thinking about this? So you want to ask yourself 3 questions. And those 3 questions are, number 1, what is the purpose of a design system? So let me give you some answers for this that maybe could be your future answers. So a lot of people build a design system. I think the most common answer is to create a single source of truth. You just want one place where all of your standards live, where all of your design components live, where just all of this lives at once. I think the second most popular reason would be you want consistency within a single product. But then there are other answers that most people don't think about, especially more junior folks. And that can be something like you want to improve the workflow of the team instead of rebuilding, a footer multiple times in Sketch or copying and pasting the group that represents the elements that make up your footer and going from artboard to artboard and just copying and pasting it from artboard to artboard. You could just have one. But also from a development perspective, as opposed to the developers creating these one-off components or sections, they're just leveraging this library, this repository of components. And when they make a change to one thing that's global, like let's say the primary color of buttons, it changes everywhere, right? Because there's this codependency. So that's an example of improving workflow. Now, unifying multiple products, that is mainly what I have most experience in. So I've built design systems with the purpose of unifying multiple products. So when I worked for Cox Automotive, subsidiary companies under Cox Automotives were companies that you may have heard about, like Auto Trader, Kelley Blue Book, Dealer.com, DealerTrack. And so my job was to, help with this design system effort that combined those experiences and made them look like one. And then purposeful guidelines. An example of purposeful guidelines is like the United States. They have a design system for a very specific reason. That is an example of that. So now we want to ask ourselves, are we starting from scratch? This drastically changes the game. And this next screenshot, if you're using a Mac, which I hope you are, because I don't know why you wouldn't be using a Mac, but get your Command Shift 4s ready. Take a screenshot of this next slide. So are you starting from scratch or not? So this is a user flow in typical UX fashion. Here's your user flow of how you should follow your process of if you're starting from scratch or not. So you're creating a design system based on this answer, based on this question, excuse me. So do you have a new product? If yes, then you're building a new design system from scratch, right? If you have a new if you don't have a new product, and you, so in other words, you have an existing product, and then you want to ask yourself, do we have an existing design system? If the answer is yes, then you're just going to build on that design system. There's no reason to rebuild it, start from scratch, unless you're doing a complete overhaul. But even that, I think, isn't necessary. You can just evolve. That's the whole point of these Lego pieces. They evolve. But if you have an existing product and you don't have, and you don't have a design system, then you need to do something really important, which is called a UI audit. You need to analyze the current styles of whatever experience already exists. And then that is going to serve as the foundation of your design system. You can't just go ahead and create your own thing and go rogue. You have to, find a way to, it's not a revolution, it's an evolution, right? And then at that point, you can make a new design system based on existing styles. And then the third question is, and I'm going to spend very little time talking about this, but this is especially speaking towards people that have aspirations to make a career out of design systems and are going to one day work on a design system team. This is the kind of team that these are the kind of roles that team could be made up of. But of course, we are specifically focusing on our role, which is the UX designer role. So let's go back and reflect on the 3 parts of a design system. So I talked about those 3 things, these 3 screenshots, but let's talk about these 3 things in a different way. Let's not say design, the code, the thinking. That was just Miguel feeling himself. But let's talk more specifically now. So what I mean by the design, I mean the design system design file. So the core sketch file, the core Figma file, the Adobe XD file, the sketch file where all of your symbols live, the Figma file where all of your components live, which for those of you that are not familiar, symbols in Sketch is the same thing as components in Figma. The code base. Now, we're not going to say the code, we're going to say the code base, which is where these components live from a development perspective. And then the documentation hub. So we're not going to say the thinking anymore. We're going to say the documentation hub. So of course, our piece, especially as beginners, is going to be the design system design file. And of course, you can start here. But from here to the rest of my presentation for the next 5 minutes, because I do want to leave at least 20 for your questions, I want to sell you on not jumping right into this yet. So what do you need to do to get started? So the UI inventory that I talked about. And if anybody wants me to explain UI inventory more, let me know and I'll answer it in the Q&A portion, but I just want to get to the end. Design principles. If I get a question, from, my students or from whoever, just wants my support, and they say, hey, I have a question about design system, I always preface after the Brad Frost, did you read the book point? I say, do you have design principles? It is antithetical to the cause of design systems to create a design system that isn't based on design principles, which are going to be the guiding, ideas that are going to ensure and hold you accountable for consistency and unification and universality, right? That is the whole point of a design system. So otherwise, you're just kind of like hoping that you hit the mark for every single component that you make. But you need to create a system of accountability that allows you to vet each component to say, is this component this, that, and the third? Okay, great, it passes the test. Now it's in our design system. Now, how to set up an efficient design system workflow. This is a bit advanced, but I wanted to put it here at least just to plant the seeds for those that want to take this a little bit more seriously. you are looking at the design system workflow that we use at NYC and Company. We start with a queue, and then every component that we want to build, we do research for. A little mini competitive analysis of what the other search, forums look like. What are the other filter systems that other people do look like, right? Some adjacent analysis. And then we design it. Then we test them, but we make sure that the tests are in context of where they actually will live. So like a dry usability test of sorts. Then we document the standards, the guidelines, the rules, the whys, the whens, the how many's, et cetera, the wheres. Then the dev team codes them, and then we publish them on the design system. We log all of our components in this thing that we call the component inventory. Fancy a way of saying a Google Sheets document where you have a list for the first column of all of your components. And then you have these columns that say, do you have a mobile version of this component? Yes. Do you have a desktop version of this component? Yes. Do you have a tablet version of this component? Yes. Give me a sentence summary of what this component is. Any other notes for this component, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Now, this is my very brief overview on how to build a design system, because this is the talk where I'm not going to talk about the design. I'm going to leave y'all on red and invite y'all to ask me questions one-on-one. So how to build a design system. You got to start with those design principles. You have to start with the design principles. If you're not going to follow anything else that I said in this talk, and if I just spoke at you for 35 minutes for nothing, and then at the very least, you got to listen to the design principles. Try to, adhere to that for every design system endeavor you embark on, every design system journey you embark on. And then second, component inventory setup. I just talked about that. And then, only then, are you ready to get into your sketches and your Figmas and your Adobe XDs. So for design principles, just because I know we don't have a lot of time, I could have a whole talk on design principles. That's how much of a UX geek I am. But if you want a shortcut, there's this really great resource where it's like a repository of other companies' design principles. So I encourage you to go to principles.design. That's the website. That's it. So now let's read this definition again. A design system is a living product, meaning we have to give it attention. We have to care for it. We have to always update it, right? We have to keep track of it with our component inventory. We have to do research for it. We have to write standards for it, write definitions for it, right? So it's living. A design system is a living product that offers a collection of visual styles, design, components, design and development, patterns, design and development, and UX guidelines, the thinking, documentation hub, that are all informed by a set of design principles to ensure their consistency, their unification, their universality, with the purpose of serving an ecosystem. I talked about how we have, components on the NYC design system for mobile, and we have them for desktop, and we have them for tablet, right? What is the ecosystem of products? For us, we have two main products, and they are two websites. So the styles, the components, are being shared by these two, products, and that is our ecosystem. But perhaps the ecosystem of your design system is you have an app and you also have a website, right? So you have to create standards that maybe speak to both. And the whole point of this is not to make you sound cooler or make you sound fancier or to have a really cool case study in your portfolio. The purpose is about people. Yes, the people that we're serving, but also the people that are working on this. So improving the process of design and development in the context of products. So this is my very simplified version of that definition. So simply put, a design system is a complete set of design standards, documentation and principles, along with the toolkit, which includes or is comprised of components, patterns, scenarios to achieve those standards. In other words, very, very simply put, a design system tells you why and how. I was really happy to give you all this talk. Follow me on Instagram, send me a direct message, slide in those DMs. I have a little summary of exactly the talk that I just gave up on my YouTube channel right now. If you want to hear me yell at you again for 30 minutes, or I think it's 15, So subscribe to my YouTube channel, Miguel Makes, everything Miguel Makes. However, the only thing that is not Miguel Makes that I tried really hard to make Miguel Makes, but I couldn't make work is this community text platform that I have where I like to, offer my, phone up to people where they can send me a direct message. I'm not always on LinkedIn. I'm not always on Instagram, but I can always receive the little ding of a text message. If you have any direct question, feel free to send me a text. This is not my real number. This is a platform that allows for people to create a number that they can be reached at in this way. And that is it. So thanks, y'all.
Miguel, thank you. I know we're going to open up. I'm going to start with a couple questions that I have, and then we'll open it up to the group. Give me a sense from your perspective, what attracted you that you got drawn to design systems? What made that happen?
Yeah, thanks for that question. So for me, it was really about, I was never really into, the micro interactions, the swiping, the typing, the flipping, the tapping. And that is a really respectable job, the interaction designer. I was a UI designer, but I had, other ambitions. I was always the type of person that saw the forest from the trees. And I think design systems is just that. I am all about systems in my life. That is a terrible oversimplification of, referring to design systems, but everything in my life is a system. And the people around me tend to get annoyed at that, but that is the type of person that I am. That is the type of thinker that I am. I think universally. And so I also think in a business context. And I do think that there is an inherent business benefit to design systems. And so marrying all of those perspectives of mine and those interests of mine, I thought were very perfect in design systems. And it's also just timing. So when I was coming up in UX, design systems were beginning to, be a thing. And so I just was really fascinated by them. And now that I'm, more on the education side of things, I'm more passionate about teaching people how to build design systems, specifically beginners, because like I said at the beginning, for beginners, design systems seem like a very cool thing, but they can also seem very mysterious. So I want to demystify this whole thing and purposely never lead with the design side, but lead with the concept. And hopefully that changes the game for how people approach design systems in the future. I know that I trailed off, but I'm going to do that for every question I get asked.
It's okay. Thank you. So my next question is, we have a lot of people who are really interested in we have a lot of people transitioning into UX. You actually came from UI, so you have that understanding of that transition. How does someone who has no experience or some experience transition into where you're at?
So from an experience strategy perspective, so from a UX strategist perspective, I find that a lot of people who are interested in technology and design, but don't actually want to push pixels, go into strategy. Now, from a strategy perspective, we're having a lot of honest conversations in the United States specifically about the role of, the capitalism and all of these things. But for as long as this situation is the situation, business is business. So we're not in a position to fulfill the needs of our users if we don't listen to business requirements and business needs. This is just a space that I feel really comfortable in. So if you have an interest in experience in business, then UX strategy may be a good fit for you. Now, from a design systems point of view, somebody who doesn't have the kind of background that I do, there's a few different ways that you can approach design systems. You can go into managing design systems, or you can go into building design systems. A lot of the things that I'm talking about in this chat are jumping between both sides: the management of a design system and the building of a design system. My UI background allows me to build them, but I am now in a point in my career where I'm more so just advising on building a design system and setting the foundation, helping a company think through them, helping understand the business needs of the needs of a business, and then advising what kind of design system they need. So there's multiple angles in design systems. And let me just say one more thing. Design systems is not the super niche thing. every company and their child companies and their grandchild companies are now all up in the design systems craze. So there are, especially larger companies, there are entire design system teams. Or I know a couple of y'all on the call that reach out to me on LinkedIn, you just started a job where there's a design system, right? So they're becoming a super popular thing. And I completely think that they are the future. So the more that they become solidified in the future of our product design and development processes, the more that there will be multiple lanes. And right now, as far as I see it, there are two: the building and the management. You could do both. You could do one of the two. I started with the first, and now I'm doing the second.
All right, so let's open it up to the group. Who'd like to go first with a question? Yeah, Anastasia, go ahead.
So my question is, I'm assuming that when you're building a design system, you're probably like working with other people, building kind of the same system. How do you make sure that you stay kind of like on the same track and kind of agree on like how to build the system as like a whole? Because I'm sure people have different thoughts about what it should be and what not to do. So how do you coordinate?
Cool. Yeah, that's a great question. I think Anastasia.
Yeah.
Thank you for your question. So it depends on how big the effort is going to be for the design system. So right now, I am the director of product design at NYC and Company. I am not director of design system for NYC and Company. So this is definitely a part of my job, not my entire job, though the entire design system falls on my lap, if that makes sense. So it really depends on how big the effort is. There's three ways that I can simplify this. Number one, if you are building a design system, but there's not a design system team, then it's really going to rely on everyone who's in the UX team. And for that kind of effort, you may want to take on the design system as a project and product in itself. So the same way you would adopt agile methodologies, 2-week sprints, project management for a project, you would do the same exact thing for a design system. You would treat it like every other project. It requires research, it requires ideation, it requires usability testing, it requires design, it requires prototyping, it requires testing, etc. It requires an MVP. So I think the first answer to your question would be treating it as a real product. And if you do that, then you put the entire organizational effort like you would anything else. The second thing is if it's a larger effort, you may want to consider making it more of a product roadmap kind of a thing and say, by Q1, we want to do this, by Q2, we want to do this, and by Q3, we want to do this. That is my secret sauce for how I built larger design systems for smaller teams. We make it into an actual product roadmap. It's not just this little project, it's this bigger initiative. However, number three, most times it's just one or two designers on a team that are building this design system, which I have a really funny feeling that that's exactly what you're referring to. So when it comes to that case, the component inventory is literally the answer to that question. But there are other things that you can do. For example, people are not very transparent with their design system progress as they should be. So at NYC, we have a Slack channel for our design system where people can ask us questions about its progress, and we're very visible. Once a month, we send out an email with what was new that was released in the design system. At one point, we flirted with launching a Medium page, which was like way too dreamy. But anyway, I hope that answered your question. And if you want me to go into more detail, feel free to send me a message directly.
Perfect. Thank you.
You're very welcome. Thanks for your question.
So who's next? Who's got something for him? Don't be shy, people.
I scared everyone.
So I'll ask you a question, Miguel. What, I know you talked about design systems as part of your whole process and everything is a design system for you. What attracted you to that? What kind of made you really feel like this is where I could fit in this, into this whole? What kind of drew to that?
Yeah, so aside from the fluffy things that I said before about how I think about everything in terms of a system, really, I think UX is inherently systematic. Everything about UX is inherently creating a system of something.
That is absolutely
right?
True.
The only thing that's missing from traditional UX endeavors is collecting all of that systematic thinking someplace. And that is all we're doing here. That is the only difference. Well, many differences, but if I were to simplify it, that is one of the main differences. So when you're building a website and you're opening up Sketch and you have 5 artboards that represent 5 different pages, do you have 5 different footers? Do you have 5 different navs? Do you have 3 different buttons? Yeah, maybe. But you may be naturally inclined to use them in a systematic way. This is where the primary button is going to be used. This is where the secondary button is going to be used. Where this tends, so this is why maybe a design system isn't entirely necessary for like maybe 1 or 2 screen projects. But when you have a larger project, it is inherently a design system, and all you're doing is just collecting your thoughts and organizing them in this system. I like to say this metaphor, yeah, for all of you Avenger geeks like I am. There is a scene, and I think one of the Civil War kind of things, or I think it was where Vision came to life, or I don't know, the other bad guy. I'm not Vision, but the No Strings on Me guy, whatever. And the Jarvis was being eaten up by this other thing. That visual always sticks in my head. So that is exactly what a design system is. It's this universe of these flying components. And we see them as 2-dimensional because we're designing on 2-dimensional canvases. But these are 3-dimensional compositions that come together and need to be organized. This whole geeky explanation is exactly what got me passionate about them. We are all building design systems. So there's this line that I didn't say in my presentation. Far too often, too many people think they're building design systems, but on the other hand, too often, many people don't realize that they're starting to build one. And I think most people are in that second camp. They don't know that they're starting to build one. And I just think that's so fascinating. And finally, formalizing this effort, I think is so healthy for the industry, so healthy for products. And I can't wait for every single product to be based on a design system.
It's awesome. Any other questions? I have one, but I want to open it up to the floor. Anyone? Okay, I will ask. Miguel, what do you look for? One of the big questions that we're always trying to answer as part of this group is ultimately you want to learn, to grow, to get hired. What do you look for when you're hiring someone for a role in building design systems?
Well, that's an excellent question. So one of the things that I mentioned in my talk is that design systems are not about product. They're about people. And it's totally okay if somebody was like, wait, you just said it was about components in this universe and this Iron Man thing. It's all right, I'll take that. But design systems are inherently about people. Yes, who we're building for, but who is behind the building. And so with that said, design systems should be set up initially, as a people-centered exercise. So the number one thing that I personally look for when I'm hiring folks to join me on a design systems team is, are they able to articulate, their ways of organizing a product. So a lot of people, will say one of the more common questions in the UX interview is UX process. Yes. In a design system, it's about process 100%. That needs to be bottom line basics. That needs to be there. But the second version of that is you need to be able to adequately articulate how a component comes together and its purpose around other components. That story is super important. So if you're not able to articulate those thoughts, you're not going to be able to get other folks around you excited about this effort, and you're not going to be able to build a coordinated effort around design systems. So number one, communication, how you talk about components. That is why atomic design is so important, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Number two, the other thing that I really look for when I'm looking to hire somebody to work with me on the design systems team is this idea that this is a living product. A lot of people think that a design system is a one and done kind of a thing. That is one of the biggest misconceptions. This is a living thing. You're updating it every single week. And I want to know that somebody knows that 100%. And then number three, if I'm going to kind of go away from the specific question and go another route. So if you are looking to get hired as having a design system, I get this question all the time. Can I make a design system into a case study? Hell freaking yeah. I think design system case studies are some of the most powerful case studies, if not maybe the most powerful case study you can create. It's the same UX process.
Where would you start? Let me interrupt you right there because you're bringing up a really good point. Where would you start if you as a young designer wanted to sort of build a case study? Do you go look for a nonprofit project? Do you just take a company that's existing? What do you do?
Yeah, that's a great question. So there's a reason why there's not a lot of content. I'm not trying to talk myself up, but there's a reason why I'm one of the first, few people that you're seeing offering a design system talk for beginners. It's because design system is inherently a more complicated, more senior thing. So my goal is, genuinely, honestly, I really mean this, is to simplify the way that we talk about design systems, so much so that beginners can get more into this. So this question that you asked is something that I'm really passionate about, and it may have been the start to this whole thing, this whole design systems talk tour. So what I will say is absolutely what you said. I know exactly the kind of mentor that I am. I am not the self-care, self-help, take care. That's not the kind of mentor I am. If you want that, I can give you some bloggers that talk about that. I am the type of person that's going to say, you got to work hard. You gotta get it where you get it so that you can get that job. And so for me, what you just said is the best route that I recommend. Work for free on a project that you're going to build a design system for. Forget about charging. That's not even the point. You're going to make more money off of that in the future than what you're looking to make at the front end. You do a freelance project, but I mean free, capital free, where it's a larger-ish product, and you're building a design system for it, and then build the most kick-ass case study that you can. What I don't recommend, because this is a question that I get all the time, can I build off of a design system and show how I would build off of it? No, I don't think that's effective, especially not for juniors. But if you're doing this, whether for free or you want to take the advice of other people, know your worth, don't work for free, fine, do that, whatever. But whatever route you go, I told y'all it was going to be a little different. Whatever route you go, you have to make sure that when you're putting this in a case study, you're telling the story in the same process-oriented way, the same design thinking-oriented way that you would any other project. There's no difference. There's no difference. There was still a process to this, except what you include is more bits of strategy.
That's awesome. Miguel, thank you so much. We're at the end of our time. This has been really enlightening. Thank you for coming to share your insight with us. And if anybody wants to connect, please do so with Miguel. And again, Miguel, what's your Instagram?
At Miguel Makes. Everywhere at Miguel Makes.
Sounds good. Thank you, everyone. It's been a great day, and I will see you next week. Take care.